Okay. Why don't you keep your hands together and clap along with me, please? Now repeat after me. Oh, a little fast. Away, away. Thank you. Away, oh, ah. You guys, away, away. All right, why don't you give each other a round of applause? All right, thank you. So, what do you think? You think music can actually connect us? I set you up with an easy question, right? Most of us intuit it, but we don't have to rely on our intuition alone. Those of us who like science to inform our knowledge actually refer to studies, and singing and moving in synchrony actually cause us to have these feelings of bonding and trust for other people. So, the little exercise we just did partly was to get our attention back in place after the break, but part of it was a little bit of a Jedi mind trick, so you'd trust me for the rest of the talk. Shaking his head, he knew I was up to something. So I'd like to just invite you to take a breath for a second and think about how music has helped you to connect to other people throughout your life. Maybe it's to share in the celebration of love, to find comfort in shared loss and grief. All of the joy that comes along with sharing the celebration of a new year and new relationships. Trying to rally the troops around a common cause. Right? In fact, human beings have figured out over millennia that whenever we need to share an emotion towards a common goal, we use music to get there. So now let's take it to the next level. Do you think music can actually be a therapy? Wow. Well, everybody gets $20. Thanks for that. I don't have to tell you the rest, but let me tell you anyways. So music therapists are actually using music in the neonatal intensive care unit to help the infants bond with their mothers so that they actually learn to suckle faster and gain weight faster so they can get discharged from the hospital more quickly. It's remarkable. It's magical. It's not magic, but it looks magical when you see it. Music therapists are using music with children and young adults who have intellectual impairments, cognitive impairments, so that they become more independent by learning to perform their activities of daily living, things like being able to dress themselves and feed themselves. Music therapists are using music with children who have autism, so that they better understand and learn the socio-emotional cues that most of us pick up in non-musical relationships, so that they learn to relate to other people better and connect to other people better and interact with people better. This is probably the most intuitive use of music as a therapy, and maybe many of us use it on the way home from work, or yeah, everybody's smiling. You have your own little things that you're running through your head right now, how you use music. But music therapists are using music to treat anxiety as both a primary diagnosis as well as a secondary symptom, and a scene perhaps like one behind me when children are being hospitalized. Music therapists are using music to treat people with memory loss, social isolation, and depression. Now it feels like almost once a week there's some new valuable study that comes out. And while I was in the green room before coming on, I was reading through some research, and one was published this morning about music stimulating the brains of people who have dementia. And as an outcome of that brain stimulation, they actually were connecting with other people in social relationships, causing less isolation and less depression. So this circle of health and wellness was instigated by engaging in music. Music in rhythm specifically is being used with people who have traumatic brain injuries, Parkinson's disease, and stroke, so that they learn to walk again or rehabilitate their cadences, their steps per minute to the beat. Music therapists are using music to help people learn to talk again. You may recognize the person behind me. She's U.S. Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. She was shot and lost the ability to speak as an outcome of that shooting. She learned to talk again by singing first. Again, it looks magical, and it is magical, but not magic. So this is where we begin to start to dig into the idea of music being a language, music functioning as a tool for communication. And I think lots of us have heard that phrase in the past, that music is the universal language, and it has kind of a sort of this kumbaya ring to it, like, yes, music is the universal language, but it probably isn't. Just like there are multiple languages, there are multiple musics. You can hear a foreign language and think, well, that sounds pretty, but have no idea what the person's actually saying, right? And the same thing is true for music. And we see these little memes on social media. Sometimes you see them on bumper stickers where words fail, music speaks, and music is what feelings sound like. There's lots of heads nodding. I mean, there is this ring of truth to these quaint sayings. But what we want to understand is there actually something in our biology that would support this experience that many of us have? So a colleague of mine, Charles Lim, who is a neurologist, a neurosurgeon at University of California, San Francisco, and a colleague of his, Alan Braun, did a study a number of years ago at the National Institutes of Health. And what they're trying to understand is what takes place in the brains of professional jazz musicians when they're playing in a way that looks like conversational speech. You may be familiar with this concept of trading fours. You play for four measures, I listen to you, and then I play something back for four measures, you listen to me. And if I like what you said to me, I might even incorporate a little bit of it, just like we might do in each other's speech. Like, yeah, you know what you just said a second ago? Well, for me, that's like, and then you add your new idea. Well, they found several interesting things, one of them being this pattern of activation and deactivation, where a part of the brain, here's your 25-cent word for the night, the medial prefrontal cortex, the front of the brain that you see in yellow and red, becomes highly activated during improvisation. Now that part of the brain is involved with autobiographical self-expression, sort of talking about yourself. The big blue area of the brain, that represents deactivation, and that part of the brain, here's your other 25-cent word for the night, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, is a part of the, I saw people go, whoa, is a part of the brain that actually is involved with self-monitoring and effortful planning. You can see that part of the brain turned off. Now I can tell you that tonight, my dorsolateral prefrontal cortex that has this self-monitoring property is probably firing on all cylinders so I don't say something ridiculous in front of the crowd, and on video that will go into perpetuity. But when jazz musicians are communicating with each other, it actually turns off. So what you have is this pattern of brain activation that results in uninhibited autobiographical self-expression. Now, how'd you like to go out with that person on a date? Uninhibited autobiographical self-expression. Somebody just said, I have. Thank you. You get an extra $20. So, but in therapy, that's clearly a very useful state of mind. When you're trying to share how you feel and what you think about a particular topic in a way that's not inhibited, in a way that sort of doesn't have that monitoring or that neural break on you. The other thing that they found was that these classic language areas of the brain, the parasylvian regions of the brain, become activated in a way that looks like people having a verbal discussion with each other. And if you controlled for all the motor areas of the brain, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between two jazz musicians making music with each other and you and I having a discussion. So, most of our patients, clients in music therapy aren't professional jazz musicians. It's the general public, which most people are either non-musicians or novice musicians at best. So we need to come up with some musical task that they could do without any musical training. So you can see behind me a little keyboard, and I've highlighted 5 black notes. That's the pentatonic scale. And they can play those notes in any order, any sequence. They can actually play them at the same time. And there's nothing that's dissonant in those notes. It sounds good. And so what we had them do, we had a young child. This was a 12-year-old female who at the time had no piano training. And you're looking at them sort of from the feet up inside an fMRI, a brain scanner. And we asked her to play back and forth in the way that the jazz musicians did. And here's what that sounded like.
Listen, then improvise.
There's the cue, and here's her reply. Okay, so you can see that even a 12-year-old who never had any piano lessons can play the piano away. That sounds pretty good. Sounds decent, right? There are no mistakes in what she played. It's a little bit early for us to reveal any preliminary data, but I can tell you one major thing that we learned is that kids between the ages of 8 and 12 really like straight teeth, and they all have braces, and the metal in their braces actually create this sort of blackout area in their brain scans while we put them through the scanner. True. They all look like they had lobotomy, but we promise you we didn't, whoever's running the IRB watching the show. So we need to come up with either better recruitment techniques to get children who don't have braces, or we need to find other ways to test this. One thing I can tell you though, in the first few subjects that we ran, because this part of the brain is further back than the area that's affected by the braces, is that these young children, even though they've never had music lessons in the past, show activation in these parasylvian regions again, those language regions of the brain. So they're able to use music in a discussion format and a conversation format, just like the professional jazz musicians were. And for us as clinicians, that could be gold because most of our clients, again, don't have any musical background. So, it's not enough for us to really understand what's happening at the level of brain activation, but we also want to understand whether or not music engagement actually changes us at the molecular level. Meaning, does it change our neurochemistry? And if so, how so? So, what we did is we asked this group of students to come into the lab and drew a little blood from them, and then asked them to sing this song for us.
The more I'm with you, pretty baby, the more I feel my love increase. I'm living all my dreams around you. My happiness will never cease. But nothing's any good without you. 'Cause baby, you're my centerpiece.
And they sound great, right? And so as a reward for sounding so good, we actually stuck them and drew a little bit more blood. All right, somebody looked like it makes sense. That way we could compare the before and after, if this sort of standard singing had any impact on their neurochemistry. And then we gave them some punch and cookies to recover a little bit, and we said nice things to them for a half an hour because we're going to ask them to sing again. And we also gave them a little test to see if they had entered into a state of flow. That's something else we were curious in. And this flow, if you're not familiar with it, you hear athletes talk about sometimes being in the zone. Or so you might be able to relate to a state of flow if you've ever had this experience where whatever it is you're doing seems easier than normal. Time seems to slow down a little bit. And you just hope that whatever that feeling is that's related to flow lasts. Okay, so we gave them a little scale to test that. And then we asked them to sing again, and this time they're going to improvise. And what you're going to watch is that they're going to take one time around and just improvise over the verse. And we told them to listen to other people's improvisations. And if you heard something you liked, maybe you could borrow a little piece of it, sing it back to that person, and then make up your own improvisation. So I hope you can see some of the body language and also try to tune into this musical interaction that they exhibit. So you can see they actually started to tease each other a little bit once they got into it. So let me tell you a little bit about the outcomes. So the figure you see on the left is a representation of changes in their adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is a measure of stress. And generally what you see is this stress decrease from beginning to end. What you see in one of the subjects is actually an increase as a result of improvisatory singing. Interestingly enough, what that subject told us in the qualitative response after the procedures were done was that she felt that her expertise was below that of the rest of the people in the group, and it showed up actually in her neurochemistry. It's really incredible. On the figure on the right is a measure of oxytocin. Some of you may have heard of before. It's a neurohormone related to bonding and feelings of trust. And it's a little more variable, but you see 3 out of the 4 participants actually had an increase as a result of singing, particularly as a result of improvisatory singing. But it's a very small sample, so what we need to do here, we're going to scale it up, use a lot more subjects, and we're actually going to change the type of improvisation that the participants engage in, because most of our participants can't sing jazz like that. Right? If we tried it tonight, most of us couldn't do what those students just did. But we have a nice understanding now that at least we know that for certain the test that we use can detect changes at the neurohormonal level as a result of singing. So I have some really good news to share with you tonight. It's good for you, it's good for us. I participated in an event at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. last weekend, where the director of the National Institutes of Health announced to a large audience that they were going to dedicate multi-millions of dollars towards music, science, and health research. Yeah, it got a big round of applause, of course, and it certainly heartened a lot of us, because there are lots of questions that we have at large-scale level in terms of the effect of music on the health of the population, the society, our country, as well as small little mechanistic questions, how elements of music actually impact the outcomes of therapy. So one of the things that we want to ask is whether or not flow and bonding are actually related to each other. And can music get people into a state of flow who aren't musicians, right? These preliminary data suggest that we're able to do it with the children who were playing in Scanner. This other one I was talking about large scale is how does feeling socially connected to other people actually impact health? And how does it impact health at the individual level? And how does it impact the health of the society, of our country? So there is an idea that you can actually improve the health of the overall society by improving the health of the individuals in it. That's primarily how medicine works in this country. But there's an inverse way of looking at it, that you can improve the health of the individual by improving the approach to health at the societal level. And what role does music play in that process? And then, of course, we want to know, is interactive improvisation, this back and forth style of improvisation, more beneficial than other forms of music performance, music making? And if so, for which diagnoses would it be better for? So for people who have the diagnoses that I have listed behind me, one of the many things they have in common is difficulty and sometimes an inability to use words to express their emotions. Some of them even experience this phenomenon called alexithymia. They don't have access to emotional words. They can't tell you how terrified they are, or how much rage they feel, how depressed they are. But clinicians have been using music to express emotion for decades in therapeutic environments, and I think most of us would agree, well, that's why we listen to music a lot of the time, is to change our mood state. So let me leave you with this tonight. I think at a time when human beings are communicating with each other more than ever through social media, texting, email still, for those of us above a certain age, we actually seem to feel less connected to each other, and in fact, people report feeling more disconnected than ever. And this loss of a sense of empathy, and the interesting thing, when we say we've lost a sense of empathy, we usually say it about other people. Why don't they try to see things from my perspective? Right? Yeah, there's a knowing laughter in the room right now. I thought about like, yeah, I do this too. How often do we watch the news or see something on social media and say, what is that person thinking? Well, we need to make an effort to try to figure that out a little bit and listen. So how are you going to do it? How are you going to try to connect with people in your lives? The people you live with, you work with, in your neighborhood, in your larger community? And how might you use music to actually help you get there? So I have a few ideas for you. Join a choir. And some of you are going, I can't sing. So what? There's lots of great community choirs where you don't have to be a professional singer to join it and get all the benefits from singing in a choir. Join a band. Start a band. You know you want to. All you garage band drummers and air guitarists. Go to concerts. And when you're at the concerts, sing and dance with each other. Learn an instrument. Trust me. Remember from the beginning, do you still trust me from the little clapping and sing we did? It's never too late. And I think what's going to happen is that each of us will feel less alone, and all of us are going to feel more connected. And that connection is what it's going to take to not only solve the problems that we face today, but to be able to solve the problems of tomorrow that we can't even begin to imagine today. So thank you so much for your time tonight.